This is Dan from Orion Blasters. Today, let's talk about the Lynx. So the Lynx, like the Caliber and the Talon Claw, the Chimera, the Taurus even, is a pump action springer, which means one pump, one shot. It takes Talon mag only, Talon mags or 3D printed mags with the Talon profile. It's bullpup, which means the magazine well is behind the trigger, so it goes in like that. Here's the mag release. It goes back to pull the mag out. You can do it with your offhand in a quick motion like that. Simply grab it and swipe down. You can also do it with this thumb release. It will gravity drop. In this orientation, gravity is down, so it will gravity drop. One thing to note is that you do need a foregrip. A worker foregrip works fine. A 3D printed foregrip works well. Just keep in mind this is about 3.5 inches or 3¼ inches of rail space, so a shorter grip is better in this case. Okay, so how the heck does this blaster actually work? Well, let's take a single dart in the mag, put the mag in the blaster. You can see through this little viewing window that the dart has not risen up in the magazine. When we pump back, the dart is now in the top position, and the ram is going to push the dart into what I like to call the turnaround. So here's a turnaround, and let me grab a dart. So the dart just got pushed into the turnaround, and then the ram seals the turnaround behind the dart. And then on this side of the turnaround, we have a barrel. So the dart just got pushed into the barrel and it's sealed behind it, and there's only one other hole, which is right here, that air can go into, and it does a 180 turnaround and pushes the air out of the barrel. So just like that. Oops, probably shouldn't have. Anyway, so how does the plunger work? Well, let me show you. So when you pump the blaster, you're actually moving the catch. This is called a floating catch system. So the catch plate's right there, and as soon as we got to the rear position, the catch fell and the system is caught. Now this whole system is able to travel back and forth. So the trigger, when this whole system is in this position, the trigger is what lifts the catch and fires the blaster. In this position, the trigger doesn't do anything. So yes, you don't really have the ability to deprime the blaster. I've just gotten used to sticking my finger over the barrel and depriming it that way. But what you gain from losing the deprime ability is the ability to slam fire, of course. Okay, so this blaster takes all Talon Claw and long shot springs. So let's do a spring swap just to show you how that works. So this pin in the front comes out, and then for safekeeping, there are 2 holes in the stock. You can just plop it in there so it doesn't get lost. This just pulls straight off. This you lift up slightly and then pull this whole unit out. We'll talk about that later. And the spring you can just fish out. This is a K18 spring, I believe. At this point you can get the plunger out, relube, do other things that you need to do to reassemble, pop that back in there. This goes in here. Of course, this is always a little tricky to do on camera, but we will succeed. There, and sometimes it helps to loosen these 2 screws a little bit. I'll get into what they do in a minute. There we go. And this goes back on here, and in there, grab that pin, put it back in here, tighten these screws, and you are good to go. If you want to swap the barrel, say from this 18-inch barrel to something shorter with an integral scar, simply unscrew these 2 little thumb screws a little bit. It takes some of the tension off the barrel, and then gently you can kind of twist it out of the turnaround and then slide it all the way out. And then in this case, I'm going to grab this nice Monkey Mods barrel with a high-speed foam scar and push it in there. And then when it gets to the very end and it engages with those 2 O-rings in the turnaround, you want to be careful. You just gently push them into the O-rings and then tighten these 2 thumb screws for a little bit of extra tension. And then you are ready to go. Okay, so now I'm going to take the blaster apart into all of its major components and show you what's what. So first, these 2 pins come out, the forward one and the rear one. The stock just slides right out. The magwell assembly comes out. Let's go ahead and take this out like we did before. Loosen these thumb screws on the barrel. Take out the catch assembly. We can grab the spring. We can twist this barrel carefully out of the turnaround. Set that aside. Let's see, what else can we do? We can pull the transfer bar and the ram out, making a little bit of a mess. This is the little dark guide piece. This is the receiver. Let's see, body bars, spacer, plunger tube, plunger. There we go. We've made a mess. Good job. Okay, so let me clear away all the single parts. Okay, so the stock assembly, the transfer bar / ram assembly, the magwell assembly, the receiver assembly, the plunger, and the pump / catch assembly. Let's talk about what you get with the hardware kit. You get some flat bars, threaded rod for the plunger, a spring guide, plunger tube, spring of your choice, barrel of your choice, bag of small parts, and a bag of extra replacement parts. And as well, I provide the turnaround and the plunger prints with the hardware kits. Basically, tired of people having bad seals, and with these two parts, you're pretty much guaranteed to have a decent seal. Okay, so basically now I'm going to assemble a new Lynx on camera so you can see how to put one together. Okay, so first off, we are going to make the plunger. So to make this part, we need the plunger print provided with the hardware kit, one of these guys, the spacer part, threaded rod, 2 of these lock nuts, and 1 of these O-rings. So first thing we're going to do is put 1 lock nut on one end. So for this, just thread it on as much as you can, then grab it with a pair of pliers. And if you have the right tool for this, that's great, use that. If not, on one of these prints, on the receiver print or the stock print, you will find this little recess that I put in there, and that's for tightening the nut. So just tighten it until it's flush on this side. And yes, I am marring the threads in here a little bit. These threads aren't used, so that's okay. Not ideal, but it is what it is. Slide this on here, and then this guy is a little bit of a tight fit, so he will have to be threaded on there. So put him on as much as you can, and then at some point you will have to kind of insert this side to hold it and thread it on. Okay, and then the O-ring goes on here, and then the other lock nut goes on here. And for this, you might need to use the stock, which also has a little recess for the nut to counter tighten the nut on there. And it may be a little awkward, but with a little bit of patience, you can get it done. Okay, so you can tighten this a little bit too much and it will squish this O-ring and cause it to be a little bit too big. What you want is this whole assembly to fit in the turnaround with a little bit of resistance. That's about the right amount of resistance. Okay, now you have made the plunger, set that aside. Let's work on the next thing. Okay, so next we're gonna make the stock. This is simple 2 prints, 2 screws. So grab your 2 prints, line them up. Take these self-tapping screws. These have very coarse threads to them, and carefully put them in. Get yourself a good screwdriver that has a decent size head that fits the screws well, so you're not going to strip the head out or anything. Remember, strip the screws. Careful not to over tighten. You'll feel when it is enough. There we go. Another assembly complete. To assemble the magwell, it's 2 parts and a spring. So grab your magwell and your mag release and the spring. I won't lie, this is a little finicky, so just be patient. Basically, here, let's grab this. It needs to end up on and around like that. So we are going to bend this outwards, go over, and then snap it back while keeping the spring in the right place. So the spring is going to go in here into the mag release, just like that. And then we're going to bend this carefully around, get that spring in the other hole in the magwell. And then on this side, just ever so carefully, snap it in place like that. Perfect. There we go. We have a magwell. Okay, so now we're going to assemble the transfer bar ram assembly. Printed part, some hardware. These are the 632 screws. These are fine thread, not the coarse thread. They're the longest screws in the kit. It's important that the part be assembled in this orientation. So line these up like this. Don't assemble it like this. Make it like that. It's non-symmetrical. Big screw, coarse thread. Put the O-ring on there, and you can feed that in there by hand, and then tighten it with a screwdriver. The more you tighten it, the more it squeezes the O-ring out. So let's leave it about there. Go ahead and grab the turnaround and put this in the turnaround hole. You want it to have a little bit of resistance. I will tighten it a little bit more. Yeah, that's a good fit, and we'll work on that in the future. Basically, you want this to be as little resistance as possible while still maintaining a perfect seal, or close to perfect seal. So this is now ready to be attached. So take these screws and you can drive them in, yeah, to the point where they are just sticking out, and then grab the transfer bar and do the rest of the work. Just like that, we have another RAM/transfer bar. Okay, so next we are going to build the receiver. Simple thing first, back strap snaps onto the receiver. Again, self-tapping screws go in the hole. Okay, so next, whenever you print small things like this is the trigger and the sear, and they have little holes. Often with 3D printers, the holes will be a little bit too small. So what we want to do is open up the holes so that the trigger and the sear ride on these little precision shafts smoothly. But we also want these little shafts to be kind of a press fit into the holes in the receiver. So what I did for a long time is I simply took one of these shafts and I chucked it up in a drill. And I've done this off camera, is you just simply take this and you very carefully expand/ream/melt these holes to be a little bigger so that at the end of the day, it's a nice fit. So I'll do a little bit of that right now. So stick it on there. And you have to be careful because you are melting the plastic a little bit. You don't want to deform the hole and have it canted off to one side. So just do it a little bit at a time, let it cool off, do it a little bit more. Now, if you actually have a 3/32 drill bit, this is the right size to ream these holes. But if you don't, I wouldn't expect you to. The pins themselves will work in a pinch. And again, this is what I've been doing for all the Lynx revisions. I only got a drill of this size, 3 days ago. All right, so after you do this for a while on all these holes, I actually did this off camera to get the sizing just right, then you can go ahead and assemble. So first things first, let's go ahead and put the trigger in, the pin in, and it's a good fit and very little resistance. You can put the spring here, trigger here. Now the sear can go through the top, line it up. The sear and the trigger have what look like gear teeth on them, so make sure they're lined up correctly. The pin drops in. Let's see, gotta get it all lined up right. There we go. And you might need to use a tool and just feel that there's a little bit more resistance now, but it's still a pretty nice loose fit. Use a tool to just kind of put that in the rest of the way. Yeah, that is a good fit. And again, the trigger is very precise. It doesn't have a lot of left to right slop, and yet it's still smooth. So then take the trigger guard, and for this, slide it in here first, and then pull down the trigger and put it in there. There we go. Trigger guard is installed. Lastly, we have these little thumb screws that go on here. There's little nuts inside, these little 632 nuts. So very carefully put these in. You're not going to be able to see much on camera. Put it in and hold it in place. And these little thumb screws are plastic, so they won't mar or dent the barrel. And these are what hold the barrel in place. So this one goes here, and this one goes here. And we have another receiver. Okay, so now we're going to make the pump and the catch assembly. So grab your pump, grab these little standoffs, slide them into the pump. It might be a little difficult to put these in here depending on your print tolerances, but in my case, they are a good press fit. There we go. And then grab your bars. 4 holes, 2 of them are unthreaded, 2 of them are threaded. So simply put them here. Now you have 2 sets of 4 screws. One of them have these little lock washers on them. The other ones don't. Grab the ones with the lock washers and like that, and then the other side. One thing to note is that the pump has a hex recess at the front of it. You see, in the stock, the thing that we use to work on the plunger, it's now covered, and the same with the receiver. So this one will remain uncovered, so if you ever need to take your plunger and tighten one of these, you can use that to do that. Okay, so next we are going to put the catch one piece in here, slide it into place until it lines up, and take the shorter screws without the lock washer and put them on here. And on the other side. Okay, so now we're going to install the catch. A decent way to do this is to take the little spring and to put it in the housing and to have it lean out a little bit, if possible. I'll be honest, this is a little finicky, but it can be done. And then compress the catch into the housing. And you see now that we have a captive spring and catch. Okay, so lastly, we're going to install this last catch piece and grab your spring guide and put it in the catch piece and put it all the way as far down as it can. And the way that this is retained actually is these screws will go and drive into the side of it. And it's possible that in your kits, instead of aluminum, you will have a plastic guide. I'm not sure which I have decided on quite yet, but it'll be one of the two. It makes very little difference which one you get. So tighten the screws. Okay, good. Now you have a pump and catch assembly. The last thing we want to do is grab your plunger that you previously made and slide it in there. Make sure it catches well. Release it. Go back. Release it. Everything is working well. Okay, moment of truth. Time to put the whole blaster together. So take your stock and your body bars. These have these half moon cutouts. Have them facing down. And slide them into the stock. 1 and then 2. And the pin goes in here. Let's see, the ram can go in next. It just slides to the back. For the magwell, I want the dark eye to be facing that way and the turnaround to be facing that way. And just slide these all the way in to make a little assembly. Grab your plunger tube and squeeze it on there. Okay, that's good. This little spacer, be careful to thread this on just right. It's hard to show on video, but you'll know what I'm talking about in person. Okay, there we go. And then the receiver threads on the same way. You may need to not be trying to hold the thing perfectly to a camera when you're doing this. Let's see, what is next? Next, we can put in the plunger. The plunger doesn't have any lubricant on it. I recommend silicone grease, Ace, or Oatly's. This is really Oatly's. This is silicone grease, which is not compatible with silicone O-rings. These are not silicone O-rings, but if you happen to have silicone O-rings, don't use it on that. A little bit of grease. Make a mess. The plunger goes in the plunger tube. And then follow it with the spring and follow it with the pump and catch assembly. Sorry if that's out of frame. It's in frame now. Perfect. And then slide the transfer bar forward, up, and over the pump like that. This guy goes in here, this over it. It's a little tight. I want to take this opportunity to just talk about something a little bit. different filaments print differently. And case in point, this pin back here, this hole in this print for this pin is perfectly sized to be just the right feel. However, in this print, same size hole in the CAD, but this pin is very tight. So I'm going to take a drill bit, this is 3/16 of an inch, and widen up this hole just a little bit. So what I'm getting at is that different filaments print differently, behave differently, even from the same company. These are the same company who makes these filaments. Same thing with this piece. It was pretty tight and I had to work at it for a while to get it loose. I do have files that are slightly bigger and slightly smaller. You can of course scale things in your slicer. What I'm getting at is that, like all other 3D printed blasters, there will be some troubleshooting involved, and that's just kind of the name of the game when you are 3D printing a blaster. So let's continue with the assembly. I'm going to real quick ream this out ever so slightly with a 3/16 drill bit. Actually run the drill bit backwards just to... And now this pin, now this pin fits nicely. So what I'm getting at is that don't expect it to work exactly perfectly out of the box, because the nature of these blasters is that there is some variance among 3D printing technology, because after all, 3D printing was originally developed to be prototyping technology. Anyway, okay, there's the blaster. Barrel goes in and loosen the thumb screws so the barrel can pass by them. There we go. And into the turnaround. Okay, tighten the thumb screws just a little bit. And let us see how this thing performs. So, it's leaking like crazy. Let's fix that. Okay, so I just primed the blaster. I'm going to stick this screwdriver in here to the ram, and I'm going to tighten that screw on the end of the ram 1/4 of a turn. There we go. That's good. Okay, this thing isn't quite comfortable to use with the without a pump grip, so I'm going to go ahead and install a worker pump grip at this time. All right, much better. To install a mag release, flat side down, or up in this case, slide it to the grip, install this side, and then ever so carefully, I know that doesn't sound good, there we go, slide it over the grip, and then you have a working thumb mag release. Okay, let's put some darts through it. Perfect. That's all I have. Thanks for watching today. Hopefully now you know more about the Lynx and how it works and how to put it together. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me through social media, Instagram and Facebook and the like, Ryan Blasters. This is the end of this part of the video. I'm going to continue on with a more fireside chat-like conversation about some of the finer details and what's going on in the Lynx and that sort of thing. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Bye for now. Okay, so first I want to touch on the fact that there are gaps here and here. So what the issue is that different printers print different Z heights. It's not very well calibrated. So your prints may have a large gap or a small gap or no gap at all. This amount of gap is okay, but if it's unsightly, you can print out these shims, 1 and 2 millimeters that go here or here. And, you know, to be totally honest, this is a hidden advantage of threaded rod blasters like the Caliburn and the Talon Claw. They can absorb a lot of the Z height air just because everything is shish kebabbed on these long threaded rods with 2 nuts on either end. So early on in this latest Lynx development, I wanted to try to add full-length spring support. And full-length in this hobby means 11-inch Caliburn-ish type spring. So this is a K25 and a K26. And I succeeded somewhat. Let me explain. So the default catch 3 part, which is this part that will come with the Lynx and in the file set, looks like this. So just as a flat face, and this is for Talon Claw springs and long shot springs, and the spring just ends right here. And then there's another type of catch 3-part that's available. You can print it if you want. That is like this. It has a hollow opening. So there's a spacer you can put in here. And with the spacer installed, this catch acts exactly like this catch. It'll take all short springs. But if you knock out the spacer, which of course is not going to happen on camera, give me 1 second. Okay, so if you take the spacer out, then in this space you can fit a full-length K25 or a K26 or another smallish type caliburn spring. And then finally, if you want to replace this catch 3-part entirely with one of these smaller ones, I'll do that right now. Okay, so here you can see I've installed a shorter catch 3 part, and this will take wide caliburn springs, such as the, well, I actually don't know, the K14, I guess. So technically you can fit any 11-inch spring that will compress down to 3 inches with this catch. But here's the deal. I found that the FPS numbers weren't where they should be with these full-length springs, and sometimes the installation, especially with the K26, would be kind of difficult because when you install a K26, it likes to buckle. The K25 not so much, but the K26, yes. And so I just found that it was finicky enough that, you know what, let's just stick with this. This produces good numbers with long shot and talon claw numbers, or talon claw springs. And if you want to try full-length caliburn springs, go ahead. It's kind of a choose-your-own adventure. I can't guarantee good performance with those, but if you want to mess around with them, it's kind of fun. One note, if you get your hands on a full-length K18 or K24 spring, having them be full length means that there's a decent amount of pre-compression, and it's kind of fun because the actual force to prime the blaster is fairly consistent because there is so much pre-compression. And lastly, I know some of you may ask what upgraded barrels and scars and springs I'd recommend for use in the Lynx. Barrels, either Monkey Mods or Curry Cafe, 13mm ID, 16mm OD, that's 0.511 inches ID, 0.625-ish inches OD. These are both 40 centimeters or around 15.5 inches. Good barrels. You need your darts to be good, though. These won't feed just anything. If you're playing with kind of a crappy dart pool, I recommend sticking with the 0.527 barrels that come stock with the Lynx and the Caliburn and everything else basically on the market. Scars, these are the highest quality scars I have access to locally in California. This is a high-speed foam Slurpee scar. So this is a SLA SLA scar inside of a Slurpee straw barrel. This is a Ton Slurpee scar with adjustable strings. As far as spring recommendations, the springs I sell with the Lynx are pretty good in the way that they are wide. They're like long shot springs in that they are wider and less likely to buckle. Unlike a K26, which when it gets too long, it likes to just kind of buckle. These guys will remain true throughout the compression stroke. However, the springs that I supply with the Lynx, I get them from this big spring manufacturer in bulk, and they have cut ends, not square ends. So if you buy a long shot spring, it'll be very similar to what I offer with the Lynx. It'll be a lot more expensive, but it will be very similar, except that it will have square ends, which will make the prime a little bit nicer. So I recommend, if you have the money, to get a real long shot spring with the Lynx.